All right, so let's talk a little bit more in depth about merging 3D objects. Now, up till now in the course, we've just created objects and then just doing some reflection properties and things with the ground plane, integrating them into photographs. But sometimes you're going to want your 3D objects to actually interact with each other, perhaps reflect off of each other or even cast shadows on each other and all different things like that. And that's when you need to actually merge 3D objects together. Now, the beauty of it is, even though you take two 3D layers and merge them into a single one, you can still edit each individual object by managing them through your 3D panel here. So let's go ahead and take a couple of things here. I've actually got a shape, a 3D shape that I've already created here, and you just rotate it around. You can see I've got an inflated face on it. And all this is a simple circular shape that I extruded, and then just went inside of, let's go ahead and select that layer, in my cap features, which is this third tab over in the properties panel, there is this inflation section. And you go in here and you can actually, let's go ahead and just kind of rotate this so you can see. And I can increase the strength and just make it kind of blow out, just messing around with the angle. And you can get kind of a rounded shape coming out of there. So this kind of a concave or convex look to it. And you can do all kinds of different things there, just making that just bulge out. So got my shape extruded and inflated in the face a little bit. So now, next thing is I have a text object. So here I have just a text going around a path here. It just says Photoshop CS6 3D. And this I'm going to go ahead and convert into a 3D object as well. So just go into 3D, new 3D extrusion from selected path. Oh, no, I don't want it to be the path, rather it's the selected layer, which is the text. There we go. So you can see it extrudes it. The extrusion itself is a little deeper than I would like it to be. So let's select that Photoshop CS6 3D layer and just bring the extrusion down a little bit. There we go. So now you can see that this text is casting a shadow on the ground plane, but I actually want it to be interacting with my round circular shape behind it. But you can see here in the layers panel that they are two individual layers. So I'm not able to have those interact until I merge them together. So I'm going to go ahead and hold down the Shift key and select both layers. And with them both highlighted, I'm just going to go into the 3D menu and down here and choose Merge 3D Layers. Now you can see now the objects are merged together, and now the text is casting its shadow on that rounded shape. If I grab this and let's go ahead and just move our current view, you can see that it's protruding out of there and casting the shadow. I'm going to go ahead and take this and push the text back a little bit in space. Select that layer and just push it back here. I think my inflation is a little bit bigger than I want that to be. And this is the beauty here. Notice I'm modifying the text. Now I'm going to go in and modify that object. And let's just drop the inflation amount just a little bit here. Just a little bit. There we go. So it's not quite as much. And now those objects are merged together. So now I'm just going to add a couple of more properties here. If I go back into that front inflation of this rounded object, I'm going to increase the reflection quite a bit. And let's just take it up to 50. And at this point, I want to do a quick render and just see what I've got going on here. So I'm going to hold down Shift, Option, Command, R. Or press R, and then we'll go ahead and do a render, and you can see it's reflecting that element in the surface there. The shadow looks pretty good. It seems a little harsh. So let's go in there into the environment settings. And this is where you've really got to get familiar with all the different properties in here. Once two objects are merged together, they're going to interact a little differently, and you're going to see things really start to take shape differently. So all right, so we got the shadow here. Let's go ahead and just do another render. And we're looking pretty good. So merging the objects certainly gives you a little bit more room to play with. Reflecting properties, casting shadows, different things like that. In fact, I think I'm going to soften the shadows in this just a little bit. Let's bring that up to around 30. And there we go. So let's do that. So there we have it. So again, you can merge multiple 3D objects or 3D layers. You can select two or more. It used to be you can only select two at a time and merge them together, but now in CS6 you can actually merge more than two layers. I wouldn't recommend, still, even though it has the capability of merging more than two layers at once, I would be careful with it because things might tend to shift around and you might be playing around with things more and tweaking them more than you would want to. So just keep it in moderation. Do 2 or 3 layers at a time if you've got multiple layers to be merged together. But again, remember, in that 3D panel, these items are still separate. This is the key thing to remember. Even though they are merged, in the 3D panel, we can see that we have one 3D layer. Here in the 3D panel, we still see those 2 individual line items. We've got layer 1, which is that background yellow shape, and then we have Photoshop CS6 3D layer, which is the text layer for that item. So we can go in there and even modify that text. Remember what I was talking about, even being able to edit the text after you've gone a certain distance? Once you've got that element in there, let's go over here into the layers panel and let's just change the text. We'll just call it, maybe I want it to say Extreme 3D. And if I close that and save the changes, it's going to update that. Still maintaining all those 3D properties. It's still merged together, casting the shadows. And if I do a render, I can see all my reflection properties going in there. So numerous ways to take advantage of 3D objects. You can do impressive things with a single 3D object layer, and you can also merge them together to get some really interesting things going on with your images. And again, if we take a look back at this background desktop, this was created the exact same way. 2 rings that I created by extruding and revolving them, then applying some textures to them, and then getting really, really close in on them, merging them together so they interact. Notice it's reflecting itself here and it's casting a shadow over here, all created in Photoshop CS6 by being able to merge those objects together. Now, at this point in the course, we've gotten to where we know how, we're very familiar with creating objects, importing objects, and then positioning them and applying certain properties to them. Now it's time to start dressing up our art with textures and surface properties, things like light reflections and light properties, adding bump maps and textures and things like that. We're going to talk about that over the next 2 lessons, and this is where it starts to get really, really interesting. So let's have a look.